to be able to gain trust both from a character standpoint and from a competency standpoint, really probably the individual drivers of what I've always tried to achieve with people.
And we used to always talk about, if we think we're getting the culture right, and we think today that we're getting it right, doesn't mean we don't have to work maybe even harder tomorrow, because nothing's permanent.
I went to training with Saturn, and that had a big impact on me because they talked about team a lot. They talked about team in this environment of vehicle sales and service, which was up to that point, and even still today, mostly an individual sport.
I don't believe we reached our potential to become the best we could be and really get that belief until we realized it was bigger than what it would bring to us.
We all should be focused on the greater good.
Hey team, welcome to another episode of It's All About the Team. And we're excited to be right here in downtown Pittsburgh with #1 Cochran Auto Group and their leader, a guy that knows a lot about building teams. Welcome to It's All About the Team, Rob Cochran.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here. Looking forward to discussing teamwork on a beautiful, beautiful day here in Pittsburgh.
It really is. What a setting. Stay focused on us, team, because they don't be looking at the skyline the whole time. This really is a special thing. We always talk with our guests about the first place they learned about team is normally at home. And so as you think back to when you were younger, you're already young, you were younger and you were a youngster at home, is there anything as you think back that was one of your first recalls of it's all about the team?
Well, I would say being in Pittsburgh and coming with all your extensive experience in sport, I was a kid that had 2 older sisters, but in many ways I was a little bit of an only child, spent a lot of time by myself. And growing up in the 70s in Pittsburgh, there was an identification with the Pirates and the Steelers, and just watching them and fantasizing about them and connecting with them and the essence of what those teams needed to do to have the success that they did. So that probably, plus some of my first experiences playing sport, baseball and such, Little League Baseball, but understanding that adults buying into something, people willing to, a player willing to move the base runner from second base to third base, even though it was a ground ball out, or a football player doing something that isn't going to show on the stat sheet, but in the ultimate pursuit, Chuck Noll in the ultimate pursuit of winning the game and winning championships. So that there was something about that environment for me as I grew up here that connected with me.
It's interesting. I was part of sports for a long time, a part of education my whole professional career, and I did and do always believe that sport can help us learn that essence of team. And I also, being an educator, have a hope that the educational system can help us do that. Even if it's woven into the curriculum of what we're trying to learn. As you think back to your educational years, any examples of that you can think?
Well, I was, a few things. I would say when I was in high school, and I went to, around here, it was Churchill Area High School, which was an affluent area, upper middle class area, good school district. And when I was a sophomore in high school, there was a court-mandated merger of the school districts. For me, connecting and engaging with people that up to that point I had no exposure to, it was really, really impactful for me, just to understand that we're all the same. We all want the same things. Our upbringing in many ways is different, and so you know, it was at that point where it broadened me. Now, from an academic standpoint, there was a little bit of chaos because they were trying to figure out what classes they can offer, and there's a lot of regulation and a lot. But from a global experience and from a worldly experience, those 2 years that I had, my final 2 years of high school, really broadened my approach. Then I went from there to Carnegie Mellon as a math major, just down the street here, and had a lot of involvement with people from all over the world coming as students.
Sure. Again,
Broadened me and broadened my perspective. So those, you know, I think when we're able to look at the world and be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others, and a lot of people say that, but from my experience, a lot of people aren't really that good at it. Why do they view it this way? Because of how they were brought up, or maybe where they were brought up, or the way the parental influence was or was not on this person. And when you can step back and do that, I think it's easier. I think it's easier for you to listen and at least have perspective, have broad perspective. One of the big challenges, I think, in the country right now is our perspectives aren't broad enough.
Yeah.
And we're not empathizing enough with other views.
Yeah. Our coaches used to always talk about awareness is critical. Awareness of outside of your little world. You know, what's important to you and what you want and what you've experienced. And then the next thing, even if you have great awareness and you don't have compassion and understanding and appreciation and respect for, as an educator in sport, one of the things we always wanted to do was we would have kids come to a university. And I always called a university that melting pot where there's unity in diversity, and that's why they're so important.
Right.
Because you came from your town, or you came from your state, or you came from your culture,
right,
and now you're with a whole bunch of different people. And we always wanted to room guys from different cultures, different positions that they played, because they think, oh, heck, the only thing that's important is the wide receivers,
right,
you know, whatever. And so to me, that sport and that education was probably the second most important thing. The most important thing was what you saw modeled at home for all those years.
Yes.
That had the most impact. But that coming together and you know, being able to, more of my guys would say, you know, I never knew a guy from Florida, and you know, I never hung out with a guy from that ethnicity or that religion or whatever, and
right,
and I learned a lot,
right,
you know, and it helped us grow closer.
Yes, and yes. So for me, those experiences really kind of paramount. My home, the lessons that I can remember from home, my parents, my father and my mother. My father was a consummate salesperson, highly driven, and it really win, win. And that single-minded purpose, intensity, almost like, if you don't win, don't come home. That kind of, and then my mother, perfect complement, just do your best.
Yeah, there you go.
Just do your best. So it was really, for me, it really was an appropriate balance between the pursuit of a task and winning, and also recognizing, kind of from the John Wooden school, you get yourself prepared, and if you prepare yourself and do your very best in all the tasks, you're going to end up winning more times than not.
Right.
So
we stole our definition of success from John Wooden. We paraphrased it, but for 25 years as a head coach, we had the same definition of success. And really, I always acknowledge John Wooden because most of it is from him, but ours was that inner satisfaction and that peace of mind, knowing I did the best I could possibly do, right, for the group, for the team. And not, of course we wanted personal goals, and of course we wanted to achieve the things we personally dreamed of, and to me that was so healthy to at least be proposed with that. Now, following it's hard,
Right.
we're human. And
Right.
so before we get into your long history of team building, teams of all sizes and teams of all locales, which is a tough deal, let's talk about your own family. So you got that modeling from your parents, and I had a chance to meet your wife and daughter, two of your daughters, I believe, and we all say that the most important thing to us is our families. We may say, well, my faith is most important in my family, and then we spend 90 hours a week at work. We all do that. It's hard to be as good as you'd like to be, but as you think about building that Team Cochran at home, anything that you could share with the listeners and viewers that you've learned?
Well, I would say that family it's been in an environment, in a business environment, really any business environment that is going to have its share of successes and challenges, its shares of winning press conferences and losing press conferences, and the turmoil that kind of goes on inside of all of us as we're dealing with that. For me, my family has been a wonderful foundation and stabilizer, to be able to have them, be able to participate in their lives. I would not have been able to, working with all of our teams. I don't think I would have been able to bring the energy that I brought to the task had it not been for being able to participate in their lives. So I have 5 children, 3 girls, then 2 boys, all within 7 years. So my wife, she stopped telling me when she was pregnant she'd start leaving notes around the house, and we always joke because she's not a great planner, and I kind of just went along for the ride. So she kept getting pregnant, but while it was chaotic at the time, I wouldn't trade anything for it. Being able to participate as either a soccer coach for my daughters, and my son's a little bit. I knew nothing about soccer, never played soccer, but I coached their teams for a bit when they were 7 and 8 years old, before they advanced to a point where my naivety about the sport really showed. And then I coached a little bit of basketball with my sons. So, not just that, but watching them engaging, whatever the activities were, going away on family time and vacations and experiences. And you're right. It's certainly the essence of a team, because there's a culture within the family. There's a way we do things, whether it's taught or whether it's just understood. I see that clearly with our children. And there are things that we pass down as parents that we're proud of, and there are things that we can, there are the shadows within each of us that we don't want to pass down, and we're working not to do that. So it's being a father or a mother is a lifelong quest, and it's been a joy for me. I've been, being able to do that and participate in their lives. They're a little bit older now, but it's still the top of my list.
Well, and in my mind, my opinion, strong opinion, is there's nothing more important in our society, civilization, whatever, is that act of parenting, and doing as well as you can possibly do. And the best part is, even after those bad press conferences, they're almost like your dog. They don't really, they don't really care, or they can sense your needs.
Right.
And I've had that, many times where you didn't even know how much you needed a hug or a smiling face, or but that's, we used to always talk to our players about setting family goals that the family is the most important social unit we have in this civilization, and now you're away from home. Mm-hmm. So, and back in the old days, they might put down their goal as, well, I'm going to call home once a week, because they'd have a quarter to use their payphone in the dormitory.
Exactly.
Or whatever,
I remember
right?
those days.
Sure,
I remember those days.
But just getting that recognition that, even though you're entering a different moment in your life, that's still darn important. And people ask me all the time, what was your greatest victory? And they might ask you, what was your best business success or whatever? And I just answered it yesterday to a newscaster. We happened to be at a charity golf outing where a lot of our former players were helping this charity, and I said, what they're doing now, that's our biggest win, because the other ones become a trivia question, right?
That's exactly right.
Something on a ledger.
Yeah.
Almost, or I shouldn't say almost, every guest we've had, when we talked about that, you could really see their mind churning, and you could just feel the emotion of what that meant. And so you were very young when you were thrust into quite a role in number one Cochran. And so if you had to say, reflecting back onto that moment, that time, what was the biggest lesson you learned or thought you have about the importance of team?
So maybe I would answer that just with when I was a kid, fantasizing about being a baseball player, I would never have thought that I would have gotten into the family business. When I was 12 and 13 and 14 and even a little later than that, I didn't want anything to do with it. And I think there were two reasons as I look back. One was my father, as the one that was getting this company off the ground, and particularly in that environment, he wasn't around very much. And so the analogy that I had was, in order to do that, you have to be there all the time. And then secondly, there was the industry had, we'll call it a reputational black eye. With, well, salespeople are like this, and all of that, and it didn't feel comfortable for me. So I'll come back to this, but part of the pursuit maybe that I've had throughout my career is aligning our company, and in a broader scope, the industry, and my influence to some degree, hopefully with some of the things I do with the industry, around pieces of me, so it feels more authentically connected to who I am. But back to that point, I didn't, I wasn't somebody that said, well, I came and washed cars when I was 12. I didn't do any of that. And my father, he didn't push, or he didn't try. He made me work in other ways and get other jobs, but he didn't drag me into the family business. I started working in the summers when I was at school. I worked after my freshman year. I worked in our parts department, and after our sophomore year, I worked in our service department. And in that environment, I learned about people, similar to the schooling, right? That the people that I was working alongside, that I might have been, I might have had a different opinion, or I'm not going to have anything in common with them. All of a sudden, you learn that we're all, they have families. They're trying to take care of their families. They have hobbies. Maybe it's a sports team, or a NASCAR racer, or whatever they do with their energies, and they all have something they're excited about. So it was that those times were important to me from that standpoint, and just understanding some of the fabric of the people that were working for the company. After my junior year, between my junior and senior year, I sold cars. And that was a period of time that was a lot of intimidation for me, because that was my father's area. It was my father's, through my eyes, that was my father's magic, and that was his brilliance, his ability on a showroom floor to do all the, to do the things that had catapulted him to where he was. And I was a quiet kid. I'm still fairly quiet. I'm still, my assessment test would identify me as an introvert. But I learned that once I start talking to people and engage and understand who they're from, where they're from, what their goals are, that it was astonishingly easy for me to okay, what's the common goal? You want to buy this, you want to buy this vehicle, these are the resources that you have, let's figure out how to do it. And to be able to gain trust, which is for me, it's to be able to gain trust both from a character standpoint and from a competency standpoint, really probably the individual drivers of what I've always tried to achieve with people. So that was a really impactful time. I was 20 years old, really impactful time for me in my career choices. And boy, I can do this. It's not, I don't need to play a shell game. I don't need to do things that I wouldn't be proud of doing, and I can get people to want to invest and go along and support me.
And these are important times in their life.
Yes.
When they're sitting with you.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
So, for most people, the second biggest purchase people make is a vehicle.
Yeah.
So it's an honor and a privilege to be able to do that for people. And so then, just a few years after that, I got out of school. I was 21, got out of school early, joined the company business. We were just in process of relocating to a big department store. And then within a year, my father had a longtime right-hand deputy who retired. I got moved up, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I got moved up, and then probably within 6 months thereafter, my father got sick. And so a few things happened. We took on a whole lot of debt moving into this department store, old Kaufman's department store. And there were a lot of tenured managers, and that I was really now in charge of at 22, 23 years old. Yeah. And so those were my first lessons. And at the same time, the economy, it was in the early 90s, Persian Gulf, the economy was slowing. The GM, over here, we started it with General Motors brands, and those brands were declining in market share as the Japanese were coming. Sure. So all of these dynamics were happening within a very short period of time. So it was trial by fire, certainly.
Hey teammates, I want to tell you about a project we're working on with Youngstown State University. One of the ways Ellen and I have decided to give back is through the Tressel Institute for Leadership and Teamwork. We've collected a set of successful business and nonprofit leaders to serve as guest servant leaders in partnership with the Sokolov Honors College to teach university students teamwork, leadership, and personal skills. We teach from a foundation built on gratitude, excellence, hope, love, and selflessness. If you're a young person or parent helping to search for a unique college experience, you can learn more at tresselinstitute.ysu.edu or ysu.edu. Links will be provided in the show notes. So one thing I've always wondered, I didn't know anything about working with cars, but I had a lot of buddies that did, and I used to think, man, I wish I knew something. They can go in and they can change the oil, or they can do this or that. And I'm sure when you went in and worked in the parts department and service, you were a little bit like, wow, it's amazing what they know, what they know how to do. So you gain an appreciation, an awareness, and appreciation and compassion, and hey, this is hard work, this is meticulous, this has got to be just right, all that. then the world changed when the cars became so computer oriented. And then all of a sudden my buddies couldn't do a lot of the things for their own car, right? Because it was now. So what was the evolution of that team was going through, especially that service part of the team that had that role? What was it like trying to negotiate through their world changing? Because that's so important, because worlds change on teams.
Yes. Well, the world has changed with service people, with salespeople. One, I don't know anything about fixing a car. I never have, and I'm not any better now than, it's not, my mother took me for an aptitude test when I was in the 8th grade, all these different, this aptitude, and I scored, okay or reasonably well in most categories, but mechanical aptitude was dreadfully, they said he's not going to be an electrician or any of this stuff. So when something breaks around the house, I go find my wife because I can't do anything. But in the evolution of our business and our industry, as you point out, from a service standpoint, the cars are vastly different, and they're changing even more rapidly. We look at what's going to happen over the next 5 or 10 years, and skill sets that served technicians well for a long time must evolve. As salespeople, the way that I was taught as a salesperson in the late 80s, these people aren't taught that way. It's now they're running through a template, and there's technology, and it's a better customer experience, but it's different from a salesperson. And when we went through that process, the salespeople that were more tenured and more experienced, in most cases, had a harder time transitioning. So one of the things that I often say is, through change, experience can be a wonderful asset for us. We can lean back on and say, boy, the way I got through this, but it can also be a detriment, because at least experience with regards to the how-tos, because the how-tos need to change and need to evolve. So we've gone through a lot of that. We've gone through a lot of that, and we'll continue to go through a lot of that. And one of the staples as a company that we look for are people that are, like-minded around evolving, and that we're going to evolve, and we're going to challenge the status quo. Just because we've done something for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years doesn't mean we're going to keep repeating that. Now, it's easier to say that than to actually do it, because I'm convinced that we could go through certain showrooms or certain service operations, and there's still too much of that element that exists, that sort of a fear of pushing through, a fear of making too drastic of change. But if you're not changing quickly enough, inertia will set in, and you'll begin to decay. And that's the balance that I think business people have to face in a changing time.
I found that trying to build a team as a college president in an evolutionary time in education, we seem to be understaffed, asking more from less people. Times were changing. We kept saying, we had to keep up, we had to evolve and all that, but then we kept saying, well, we don't have time. And it was amazing listening to the team members, whether it was a staff member, a faculty member, someone doing whatever their role is they would always tell us, if we just had a little more time on our training, because we want to keep up, we want to, and I found that to be, I never solved that, quite honestly. And when you have a big operation like you do, keeping up with that training, but also meeting the needs of your service department still has to, because the customer's counting on that.
You have to execute. You have to execute the daily tasks, and then you have to find time to evolve. And it's not easy.
Yep.
If it were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yep.
So it's not easy, but you have to just look at it as a challenge and keep working and trying to get better.
So when you took over as CEO, how many dealerships were there at the time?
When I started, there were. When I got out of college, there was one, and then in the first, and that one was relocated, and then in the first year, working with my father, he had acquired a store in Butler North, and then we had started a store in Robinson out by the airport. So we had gone to 3, and then a year or 2 later we had to close. We actually sold off the one in Butler because it wasn't performing well. So when he passed away, there were 2 physical plants. The one, our home, our headquarters in Monroeville, and the one in Robinson Township.
And so what year did he pass?
It was 1993.
Okay, so 93 to 2024, you've gone to
30, 35, whatever it is, yeah.
Okay, so building teams now in 32 locations,
yeah,
in an evolving time, in a lot of different things going on in the economy and people's lives and so forth. Talk a little bit about the efforts of trying to keep the culture that you believed in, that authentic experience you wanted the people you were serving to have, and having to do it in so many different locations.
Well, the early days, in the 90s, it was me trying to learn as much as I could from people that had been doing it longer than I was. Being a sponge, keeping the ego. I think from a leadership standpoint, one of the biggest things that leaders wrestle with is their own ego. And they too many people get too full of themselves and think they figure it all out. So I've been doing this a long time, and it's really important to say I have not even gotten close to figuring it all out, because there's so much more out there. And it changes. What you figured out 20 years ago in some ways may not apply now. But when I was in that period in the 90s, just connecting and beginning to get comfortable in casting a vision, here's where we're trying to go. That at first that was scary for me, because when you do it correctly, there's some vulnerability. You're sharing something, right? You're sharing, and it's easy for people just to say, well, this will never work.
Yeah, right.
This will never. What this kid? Yeah. Who is this kid?
That's right.
And there are all kinds of different things that I tried back then. I right at that time, you may remember the Saturn brand that was launched. We were a Saturn retailer. I went to training with Saturn, and that had a big impact on me, because they talked about team a lot. They talked about team in this environment of vehicle sales and service, which was up to that point, and even still today, mostly an individual sport. You talk to Joe Brown, the salesperson, and as a customer, it's Joe Brown, and most of the compensation systems throughout the industry are individually based. So how do we evolve from that to have the people understand that there's something bigger than just what they're doing? Yeah. And it starts, to me, my experience, it starts with a story. Here's where we're trying to go. And the better you become, and I've worked over the years at it, the better you become at telling that story. The more clear that story, the more people can buy in, both with their heads and their hearts, to that story. You begin to get more followers, or more people buying in. So I think there was a period of where people in that first decade were what's this kid going to do? Is he going to make it? To a gradual of a percentage of them. I'm not naive to think 100% were behind me, but I had a large enough percentage of people saying, "I get it, I'm in. Where are we going?" And that was a threshold. And there were a couple strategic things that happened. That department store, we relocated again. That was a big move for us, and that put us in position to begin to acquire other dealerships. So it was a 10 or 12 year period of a lot of movement of myself, some maturity and some just perseverance, just working through people, getting the right fit of people to move to another level. And then it was, here's what we're about, and we've got enough people to know what we're about. Let's go try to repeat this and duplicate this in other environments.
So did you have, like when you would expand to another location, did you have interaction between your current locations with the new one and have some cultural training, if you will?
We've learned and we've gotten better at how to do that. Mm-hmm. I think the first acquisition or two, we didn't do it as well. And like with anything, you stumble and you refine and stumble again and refine a bit more. So now when we go in, like when we relocated, well, not relocated, we expanded into Youngstown, we had probably 20 people, subject matter experts that go into that environment, that show people how to work our computer systems, show people this is how our sales process works, this is how our service lane, this is what we do in the service lane, and they're accessible for people. We can still get better because we've been told that whether it's 30 days, we're there for a period of time, and then we pull out, and then all of a sudden there's all this energy and all this support, and then there's the next week it seems like nobody's there. So as we look and as we continue to go down the road, we'll keep refining. It's a process. When you do process right, and this is a little bit of the Carnegie Mellon part of me, you should be continually looking to how to refine the process and how to make it better and better. So we do. I think we've done that. I think we've done a better job. We still have there's plenty of areas that we can improve though, as far as getting our culture in all of these places, because it's still not as consistent as I'd like it to be.
And we used to always talk about, if we think we're getting the culture right, and we think today that we're getting it right, doesn't mean we don't have to work maybe even harder tomorrow, because nothing's permanent, and as you say, when you maybe take those subject matter experts and put them back where they were, and assessing how our culture is, I've always found to be, I love to measure things. Well, that's not measurable in a lot of ways.
That's correct.
It's that feel, but to me that's the thrill of it. It's why I always liked coaching, is that every season was a different group, and every time we went to say, okay, this year, how well are we going to do building a team? Yes, some of the people are different, and some of the realities are different. But to me, there's a thrill. That's why we wanted to do this podcast, and because there's something cool about when you feel like you've built that culture, but it doesn't mean it'll be there tomorrow.
No, and I think, and I've never been a coach other than 8-year-old soccer, but I think maybe one of the benefits, or one of the interesting things, is, at least in the college ranks, right? There's a turnover every year of players. So the freshman or the sophomore that now is emerging, you can say, hey, we're looking for a little bit more from you this year. And there's an understanding with most of those. Okay, it's my time to add a little bit more. In the professional world, we have to we have to bring that along without necessarily just, we're not pushing anybody out, right? So how do you, and that's part of why we grow. That is part of why we grow, is to create opportunities for people to move into larger roles, leadership roles, and that has served us well. That is one of the tenets of our culture. Is that, boy, this is an organization that I can grow in, and I can learn more, I can be challenged, but you can't do that if you're retaining key people. You can't create more opportunities for others unless you expand the base. And so that why do we grow? We grow to have more offerings and more value for our customers and more opportunities for our team members. And that, it's a big circle.
So we're constantly working on how we individually can be better team members. And hopefully we're spending some training time on ourselves. But again, you get so busy, And then we talk about our team, your team. So then you start thinking about, okay, how can we impact the greater good? And one of the things that I've felt about communities is, if you really have some great businesses leading that culture of the community, if you have sports teams creating that excitement, if you have the arts, giving that creative, that thing to do, that thing to marvel at. You said you didn't know anything about, working on cars. I didn't either, and I couldn't paint anything, or I couldn't play an instrument if I had to, but you marvel.
You do.
And so as you think about where a business fits and where the arts fits, we've kind of talked about where the sports fits in the building of a culture of community. Talk a little bit about where you think a business fits, because I know everyone we talked to when number one Cochran was coming over to the Youngstown area was, oh man, I mean, they are a staple in Pittsburgh. I mean, they're a difference maker in Pittsburgh. And how do you go about doing that?
Well, whether we're an individual within a company or a team, or whether we're a company within a community or an ecosystem or an industry, part of our energy always needs to be focused on things that are above and beyond what is beneficial to us.
Amen.
Are we buying into the greater good?
Yeah.
Are we buying into the greater good? Is the Audi salesperson buying into what number one Cochran is about? Is number one Cochran buying into what the goals of the Youngstown business community or the Pittsburgh community? Are we buying in? Are we supporting that? That to me is just what we all need to do. And it's all relative to our resources and our time and what we can commit. But we all should be focused on the greater good. And in our environment, as you referenced, the greater good is we know the benefit of arts into a culture, and we need to, all of us within that community should be doing what we can to make sure that is supported and cared for. Sports teams, other community, the parks, whatever it is that create the essence of community.
Right. We
need to, particularly in these areas, right? In Western Pennsylvania, in Northeastern Ohio, it is essential that we spend time and invest our resources to make them better places to work, and there's a lot in that. Can I get a good job? Can I support my family? And can I grow? Can I develop my family and raise my children in the way that I think is best for them in this area? We have a lot to offer in these areas. We have a lot to offer in this part of the country. I think sometimes we're not as good as in telling people about it as we need to be.
Well, we had an adversity in Youngstown a little bit. Pittsburgh had similar with the steel industry. Mm-hmm. It was probably a bigger deal to us in Youngstown because we weren't quite as diverse and large, mm-hmm. As Pittsburgh. But it was adversity. And we always felt that one of the biggest reasons we needed to have a great team culture was that there's going to be adversity. I know every good business I've ever talked to, they're from where they were to where they are now was not linear.
It is.
Right? I mean, right? It crashes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like human development, the same thing.
Right?
Yep.
Right? And so as I think about, and again, it's easy when you're not somewhere every day, but I've always been impressed. I came to this part of the world. I grew up in Cleveland, which the people in Youngstown, culturally are very tied to Pittsburgh, every bit as much or more than Cleveland. And so I didn't know, the area. But when I came in 1986 and spent 15 years and then came back and spent 9 years, I was always impressed with what Pittsburgh did handling that adversity, what they've become. I thought the cultural arts community had a lot to do with it. Was I seeing accurately?
Yeah. Well, Pittsburgh has the benefit of the endowments from the various foundations going back to the Mellons and the Fricks and the Carnegies, and so that we have always punched above our weight as the size of the market. For what we offer for people that are here. Hopefully the people that are in this community appreciate that, because if you went to another community of 2 million plus or minus in a metro area, they're likely not to have the arts that the people in Pittsburgh have. So it's a definite advantage for us. I think we just need to market it a little bit more effectively.
I feel the same way a little bit with the Youngstown, Warren area, in that we're a 500,000 MSA, not 2 million. But if you think about the Butler Museum of American Art, and you think about the Dior Center, which was the original Warner Brothers auditorium, and you think of Stambaugh Auditorium, and our park system was one of the first ever. But we did the same thing when we came into Youngstown State talking about our football team. We don't brag enough about our past, and I really believe, and I think it's a little bit of a country problem too. We always said we're going to build on vivid recall of past successes, and so the only way there's vivid recalls if we talk about them, we appreciate them, we brag about them, and yes, everything hasn't been perfect. Yes, we've had adversity. Yes, we've maybe made poor decisions along the way at times, but we're awfully blessed with what we have here in this region. And if you're going to build a team, the first thing you're going to have to build is that belief.
Yes.
That, we can be a good team.
Yes. The belief that here's where we're going and we can get there.
Yep.
That is step one. Here's where we're going,
right,
and we can get there. And there's alignment of where we're trying to go.
And as you say, constantly, effectively tell that story as to why we are going to get there.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of naysayers that, oh no, we'll never. I remember when I told our team in 1986, I said, we're going to be the national champions. And it was like, as soon as we believe it. And it didn't happen in 2 days, it didn't happen in 2 years, but that constant discussion. And I think, and I want to end with this thought, because I think this is overreaching a lot of what you've been talking about. I don't believe we reached our potential to become the best we could be and really get that belief until we realized it was bigger than what it would bring to us. It was bigger than that big ring we would get. It was bigger than that trophy. And trying to instill in our guys, and our guys were young, 18 to 22, that, guys, as soon as we understand that what will result will be way bigger than anything that we'll personally enjoy, as soon as we understand that, I think we've got it.
Yes, and there's challenge, and there's more challenge now. There's more challenge now, clearly, I would imagine in collegiate sports, but there's more challenge now because there's all this information out there, and the temptation of people buying into, well, individually I'm not being taken care of. Individually I could be individually, and so our message as leaders, the message needs to be strong enough to have people not be tempted by all these messages that are out there. And that is a daily challenge in whatever pursuit that we're in.
And we talk about team every day. And that's why, we wanted to have this podcast. It's all about the team. But people are getting talked about with a lot of things every day, all day long. Mm-hmm. And we, as those given that wonderful responsibility to try to help build team and culture, we can't talk about it enough.
Right. And I'm a believer in long term, because the essence of team is you're building. It's not a short-term journey. Right. You're building towards something, and so as you are creating relationships in a long-term perspective, what we hope is that the people that are joining the journey, that we can create a relationship that will not be perfect. It will not be perfect. There will be ups and downs, but it's much like, I've been married for 29 years. It's not been perfect, but there's enough trust that if I do something, that I say something, I do something dumb, or my wife says something that's not, what she wouldn't, okay, you keep moving forward. And so we have to embrace each other's imperfections and learn from them and keep moving together, because it's that when the team has that type of fluidity, that's when it reaches its zenith, when there's that level of movement and that level of trust to be able to be authentically who we are and in pursuit of something bigger than us.
And that understanding of that lack of perfection.
Yes.
Because
we're humans. We're human. We might pursue it, but we're all going to do. I can just speak for myself. I do a lot of dumb things or say a lot of dumb things. Hopefully, none will be reflected in this podcast. But you just do the best you can, and the process you learn and try to do better the next time.
I think our listeners and viewers have a better understanding now of why Number One Cochran is a special place, and it's been a huge thing for the city and area, the Pittsburgh area, and we're so excited that it's part of the Youngstown Warren family. And
couldn't be more excited to be in Youngstown. Youngstown has been so, to your credit, and to so many that have reached out to us in these 2 years that we've been there, it's been overwhelming. It's been overwhelming, the support that we've gotten, the care that we've gotten, the people that will say, this is a big event. You need to make sure that you're there. Mm-hmm. We're touched and we're humbled to be part of the community. We're going to do our best to make it better. Do our part to make it better.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. And team, as you can see, it's bigger than any one of us individually, and it's all about the team. Until next time, have a great one.
You never got on my nerves. I hope I didn't get on yours. No, Joe Judge was different. You got any Joe Judge stories for me?
Well, Joe, look, we spent a lot of time with Joe.
Yeah.
And I love Joe, and he knows this, but Joe and I have we've been on a roller coaster ride.
Bill, in my opinion, really embodied special teams as an equal third phase, and made the rest of the team really realize, like, if you're providing for us here, you are just as valuable as anyone else.
Like, it's okay to have individual goals. I think that's important. I think you need to be a self-starter. You need to be motivated, in your own personal ways. Mm-hmm. But, ultimately in the game of football, you begin to see that, hey, if the group can have success, and if we can have success as a group, it's going to benefit and trickle down to everybody. And we were beneficiaries of that playing here. So when you can get guys to see that, then it kind of speaks to both needs, both buckets that need to be filled, and you can try to tag it from there.